Hey, friends, welcome back to Notes from the Edge, the place where we have the conversations that we should be having, but we aren't. The things that we should have been talking about all along. And today we're going to be talking about money, which is sometimes a dirty word for people. Now, what if your biggest money problem has nothing to do with money? That's what we're going to be talking about today. And my guest, before becoming a financial advisor, Douglas Lynam, spent 20 years as a monk after beginning his adult life pursuing the Marines. His extraordinary journey eventually led him to a startling realization that our financial behaviors, I love this, reveal some of our deepest wounds. In this episode of Notes from the Edge, we're going to explore why wealth isn't actually about the numbers in your bank account, but maybe about fear, scarcity, belonging, identity, purpose, and learning that you are enough and already have enough. Douglas' path has been anything but conventional. After beginning his career in the Marines, he spent 20 years as a monk and leaving that life to become a financial advisor. We're going to be finding out how that journey took place. His work has been featured on NBC, the New York Times, and his TEDx talk on the psychology of money has been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. And today he advises everyone from entrepreneurs to executives to people like myself who want financial health that creates psychological health. So welcome, Doug. Welcome to Notes from the Edge. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your show. It's a real honor to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. What a great topic. And you know what? We don't talk about it enough. It is kind of a dirty word for people. This is definitely a conversation we should be having all along. So, most of us think that our bank account reflects how hard we've worked, right? Work hard, then die. That's how I was kind of raised. But first of all, we always ask our guests about their own journey. So, how did you end up working with people in the way you work with them today? Walk us
Oh,
through a little bit about your extraordinary journey.
well, Lisa, it's a long story. I'll try to keep it succinct and give you the highlight reel. And if you want to kind of dig a little deeper into any part of the story, I'm happy to go deeper. But essentially, of course, like all of our stories, it begins in childhood, and which is really where our money issues and traumas often begin. And for mine, I grew up in a fairly wealthy family, which is a real privilege, but it didn't come without its stressors and strains. Um, when my parents divorced when I was about 7, total warfare broke out, and money
Mm.
was the tool that they used to dominate and control the battlefield. And so, even though my father was a CEO, I remember one time asking him for some money for a new pair of shoes. My shoes were falling apart, and he's like, "Well, go ask your mom. She's got all my money in alimony." I'm like, okay. And then you
Mhm.
ask your mom, and she's like, "Well, go ask your dad. She's got." They basically were always playing financial chicken with each other, trying to get the other person to pay for everything, and sort of played poor whenever we asked for stuff. Meanwhile, they're living in McMansions and jetting around the world and things like that. So it kind of really developed a really negative mindset in my mind around money, and I took me a long time to realize, of course, much later that they weren't trying to be cruel; they were just scared, and they had so they grew up in great poverty themselves. So
Mm.
money was a real source of emotional anxiety for them. But moving forward, like my brothers, I have two brothers. We all rebelled in very different ways. I have a twin brother who ran off and became a homesteader in upstate Vermont. I have an older brother who ran off and joined a moderately successful grunge band in Seattle.
Good for
And
him.
then,
My husband's a mechanic by day, musician
uh,
by night, so I get it. Yeah.
and so I first rebelled by running off to the Marine Corps. I went to officer candidate school and I graduated top of my class. But then they sent me back to finish one more year of college, and I kind of realized that unresolved anger issues and high explosives were probably a bad combination.
Yes. Yes, I would say so. Maybe,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah, I
Just
enjoyed it a
maybe.
little too much, and I went looking for a higher calling, and what would that be? And also, what would be a great way to really annoy my parents and piss them off? So I joined a Benedictine monastery and took a vow of poverty, like my brothers, and did it in different ways, and tried to turn my back on the world of money and materialism. And so that seemed like a great idea, and I was just going to opt out of the whole game entirely. Unfortunately, I landed in a community where everyone hated dealing with money as much as I did for various reasons. And that just doesn't work out very well long term, which meant our community ultimately went bankrupt. And then
Mhm.
so we took the vow of poverty just a little too seriously. And someone had to sort that mess out. And for whatever reason, that fell onto my shoulders, even though I had no clue what I was doing at the time. So the blind leading the broke. But I got through it, and then that was pretty early on, about 3 or 4 years after I arrived, and I was there for 20. But then I realized that a lot of guests were coming to the community with lots of problems, and they would ask me to pray for them, which of course I do. But then I'd also kind of look at them and say, budget might actually work a little bit better. We don't have, these aren't mutually exclusive. We can do both. Like we can
Mhm.
pray for you, but we can also some really practical, tangible things that could be done to alleviate your suffering. That and the real epiphany was the realization that so many people, most of the guests, their suffering that they were experiencing was either directly related to a financial problem, or there was a significant financial problem lurking in the background somewhere. And if I could jump in and help them solve that in some practical way, that would be a really great gift I could give to the world. And so that's what I did for those much of those 20 years, doing pro bono work with generally very poor people. I was also in a teaching order, so I was teaching a local high school, had the math department, and started teaching econ and personal finance as a passion project. And then in 2016, when our monastery kind of started to fall apart, and I was looking for another adventure, I thought, well, what am I going to do next? And that's a whole big saga right there, which I won't go into all the details now. But essentially, I realized that I had a passion for finance and for serving people and helping them through these real difficult struggles that they were having, both emotionally and practically with their money. I became an investment advisor, and that's what I do full time now. I work at Course Management Investment Advisors in Pinehurst, North Carolina, and I'm also the author of two books. One is called From Monk to Money Manager, and the other is called Taming Your Money Monster. And the subtitle to that one is called Nine Paths to Money Mastery with the Enneagram, which is a very deep philosophical and psychological tool, which we can talk about if there's time.
Oh, we will talk about it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No,
Yeah.
we're definitely going to hit on that because I think it's really important for people to check that out with you. So, you've lived remarkably different lives, a Marine, monk, now financial advisor. What is the thread connecting all three of those, do you think?
I think just trying to be of service, looking for deeper meaning and looking to be of
Mhm.
service to the world. Like, how can I use my time and talents to heal the crack in the world that I was uniquely designed to fix? And I think that's true for most of us. That's really what can I do? What unique gifts do I have that will really serve the world? Where I can alleviate. I sometimes call myself a self-proclaimed suffering prevention specialist. That's really what I.
We do create much of our own suffering, don't we?
Yeah.
We do create much of our own suffering. And I think you bring up a um, very important point, Doug. When we have meaning and purpose in life, it changes our want and desire to continue and be here even when it gets hard.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's really important. You say that money problems aren't about money. And if money is a simple language, what is it? What's the deal with our fears, identity, even our childhood, the stories we believe about money? Talk a little bit about that, the stories from childhood that carry over. I was raised in the swamps of Louisiana in trailer parks, very, very poor. We rolled pennies to eat food. So, and then I hit corporate at 21 and at 22 was making six figures. So, and didn't know how to manage money other
Hmm.
than roll pennies. So
Hmm.
talk to me, fear, identity, childhood wounds around money.
Well, it's a deep question. And first, I would say just a small linguistic correction. It's definitely a foreign language, but I wouldn't say it's a simple language. I think it is a foreign language for most of us, and we don't know how to speak. The part of the problem is we don't know the lingo and the dialect of the language of money, and it takes education and it takes some basic training just to know, well, what is compound interest, how do interest rates work, how do equities work? Those are some very practical skills that we just don't teach our kids in high school, which we should. I think is a shame. as a former math teacher, I always lamented the fact that we drill the quadratic formula into kids' heads, but not compound interest, which I think is a real shame. But at any rate, that's another diatribe for another day. But I think really what happens is money, it's attached to it's the most it triggers, I think, the most primal instincts inside of us. For us, money is it's it's food, it's sustenance, it's shelter, it's our status in the tribe. And so it triggers some of the most primal emotional responses, which are often, fight, flight, and freeze.
Mm,
There's a fourth one, fawn, which is actually really interesting. But those are really the four kind of ways that we can have a negative stress response to the world of money. And some of us fight with money. We're trying to prove our status, or we're out there trying to maybe anxiously grab as much as we can to try to assuage those childhood wounds growing up poor, like my father did. He had to go out there and collect soda bottles after school in the alleys and highways to redeem them for a nickel that would help, feed the family that night. So he
mm,
had this he was really fighting with money his whole life because it was trying to answer a question I think that money was never meant to answer, which is fundamentally, what are you really worth as a human being? So we have a fight response. We can have a freeze response, which is kind of what I did, want to just avoid it and run to a monastery and pretend it doesn't exist. And some of us flee. We run away. We push it away because we're scared of it. The bills come in and we don't open them. We don't balance our checkbooks. We don't do a budget. There's a ways in which we run away from the world of money. And so I think that all of that comes back to really these childhood, and this gets into the Enneagram, which is the real answer to your question, which is a whole other can of worms. But essentially, it's we're we're having basically a biological stress emotional response to our money and to our relationship with it, and that can drive us into all kinds of unhealthy patterns of behavior that basically cause us to self-sabotage in very different and often tragic ways.
mm. Self-sabotage. I get that. I get that. And I get fighting with money. And for me it was getting out of the swamps and having something to prove,
Yeah.
right? Having something to prove. So and I think the stories are so important. The stories we tell ourselves change who we are, how we are, and how we show up in the world.
Yeah.
So one of the themes we explore in Notes from the Edge is the roles we perform in order to survive. Do you see people performing financially, like I was talking about? And then what are some masks we wear around money? And what are we protecting with money?
Oh, wow. I mean, I'll talk to the last part first because I think it ties back to the masks and the performance. But what we're protecting is our deepest unconscious fears, that we all have, which the Enneagram labels for us in very helpful ways. But I think we all have a deep core childhood fear that drives most of our behavior in all aspects of our lives. But it
Mm-hmm.
also shows up very poignantly in the way we relate to finances. And
Mm-hmm.
naming that fear is really a big part of the battle, and then knowing when you're in a stress response around it. But
Yes.
the performance piece is often, it can be a number of factors. It can be the performance of competence. Like, I want to look successful, even if the reality might not be. A lot of us have our financial lives are kind of like a Hollywood set. It's beautiful on the outside, but kind of paint and plywood on the inside. And
Been
then
there. It was nice veneer. It
yeah,
was nice veneer on the
yeah,
front. I had the six figures, the house, the cars, the toys, the
yeah,
pretty pictures on Facebook, and I was dying on the inside behind
yeah.
the scenes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was my dad too, which was really sad. So I saw that firsthand from another perspective, and then a lot of us were were performing even our incompetence in some way. That becomes a we tell ourselves a story about, well, I'm not good with money, or I don't deserve money, or money's one of the biggest ones I saw is that money's inherently evil or bad. That only greedy
Yeah.
and selfish people care about it. There was one monk in the monastery. I call him, euphemistically, I call him Brother Pius. And Brother Pius refused to touch money, cash, credit cards, any form of currency, because he thought that money polluted the soul, and that
Mm.
somehow engaging with it was spiritually detrimental. And he thought that that was really a path to holiness. And really, what it did is just make him rather insufferable, because it really just gave him a higher perch to look
Very
down on the
cranky.
rest of us. Yeah.
Well,
And
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, and so, but meanwhile, if his hypothesis was true, which I don't believe it is, that somehow money touching it pollutes the soul, well, his refusal to engage with it meant that I had to touch it all the more often. And so, like, how is that? Like, you're just pushing it off onto me, and
Yeah.
then looking
He
down
went
on
in
me
freeze.
for
Yeah,
taking
he went
care of you.
in
For
freeze.
I gotta balance the budget every week. I gotta put the roof over the head. I gotta figure out how to fix the
Well,
leaks.
yes.
Like,
Yes.
and then, but I'm the worldly one who's less than, because I'm
Playing with the
in.
evil things.
Right, right. So there's all these, the mask of holiness or sainthood around it, or whatever it is. There's so many different ones we can wear, and they can get us into all kinds of trouble when we're not radically honest with ourselves about what it really is we're running away from or trying to
Yeah.
protect.
Well, in my family, they thought rich people were evil or bad people, and so that's how I was raised. That rich people are assholes.
Right.
Really is how I was raised. So, but this brings us right into the next question, which is about mindset.
Yeah.
And scarcity isn't always about having too little. Sometimes it's about we believe we're too little. So, how do you, when you work with people, help them? Because that's a tough one.
Yeah.
How do you help somebody recognize the difference between a financial problem and a self-worth problem?
Well, it's really, that's the heart of it right there, and that's where the Enneagram is so useful, because I can then diagnose what the root of that self-worth issue really is. Like, what is that deep fear that is coming up for that person over and over again? And I think for so many people, like even the example of my father and Brother Pius, I thought they were opposites. They were actually the same person, just running in different directions. Like, they were both using money, running away from it or grasping too anxiously to it, as a way of trying to figure out whether they were worth anything at all. Right? It was the
Mhm.
way of, like, how what is that somehow my net worth and my self worth, for what up or down, right? Whether you think uh, being rich is bad and being poor is good, or being poor is bad and rich is good, you're equating your net worth with your self worth. And the real problem is that, um, decency, kindness, and the loving human spirit has nothing to do with your tax bracket. Like, that has no correlation whatsoever. And so really is, um, there isn't a simple answer to your question, other than to go into a long diatribe about the Enneagram. But essentially is you have to, you just know it when you see it. Like, there's either too much anxiety or too much avoidance around it, and there's too much what's the performative nature within which this person is relating to and acting out essentially their trauma. Like,
Yep.
it's a trauma
Yeah.
response. And
It
so
really is. Yeah.
it's
And you bring up a very good point, and we talk a lot about this on Notes from the Edge and in my memoir, Notes from a Certified Madwoman. Observation is not neutral. That's quantum physics, it's quantum mechanics. The minute you get brutally honest with yourself, here's the beauty of the work, is some of it can be so simple, and I think we complicate it. The minute you recognize it, the minute you get that brutal honesty, that excavation of where you're at. So speaking of that, let's roll into the Enneagram, because it's a tool that you use with your client. So talk to us about that, the importance, and how you roll people through it.
Yeah, so for those listeners who aren't familiar with it, the Enneagram is a personality typology system. They may have heard of Myers-Briggs or DISC or Colby. In the professional world, there's all these different ways you can measure personality, and the Enneagram is one of many very useful tools. And it's actually been grounded now. Some people think it's kind of woo-woo, but that's not the case at all. It's really been now grounded in the neuroscience. It validates it, and childhood developmental psychology has validated. The American Journal of Psychiatry has said this is a a valid system. We can use it in psychotherapy. So it's really gotten some real robust legs under it. But the simple way of thinking about it is the word Ennea. Ennea in Greek means 9,
Okay.
and the word gram means drawn. So word Enneagram is these 9 archetypes of personality. So draw them on think of a circle, and then think of a color, make that circle a color wheel. And if we were to divide up a color wheel into 9 even quadrants, like a pizza pie, your personality is going to fall somewhere in one of those quadrants as a shade, hue, and texture. And there's infinite variety inside that for, but your personality tends to fall somewhere in a range within that system. And it doesn't tell you everything about your personality, because your person has so many facets to it. You have a nature, which is your DNA, and you have a nurture, which is kind of how you were raised. And the Enneagram helps explain the nurture portion of your personality. Basically, what were the biggest stressors that you had in your childhood? And those stressors, the constant stresses we all felt in childhood for one reason or another, trigger one of 3 core negative emotions. And these core negative emotions, they appear in all mammals. They're like in our lizard brains. They're biologically deep, and all your other negative emotions run off of them. And those big 3 negatives are anger, grief, which sometimes feels like shame in mammal and adult, like in human beings, but anger, grief, and fear. So you got hit with one of those a little bit more than the other in your childhood experience for whatever reasons, how the no's were delivered to you in childhood, how the boundaries were set. If you tell a child, like, no, don't run into the street, you have to back that up with a certain amount of negative violence in order for it to be effective, right? You can't say it in a sweet, loving voice. You're going to
Yeah.
load that with anger, and you're going to load that with fear, and you're going to load that with shame. Like, how did you get hit in your childhood? And then there's 3 ways you can process that negative emotion. You can internalize it, which is kind of like giving yourself an emotional wedgie. You can externalize it with like having a food fight with the world, or you can have both. And that's why there's 9 types. So there's 3 core negative,
Fantastic.
right? There's 3 core negative emotions, 3 ways you could process them as a child, and that kind of tells you where you land on this Enneagram system. And then the punchline really is that 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 negative emotion, it did a lot of things. Actually, and this is really deep, and I won't go into this rabbit hole, but it's actually what allowed you to have self-consciousness in the first place. So it's actually a necessary wounding, and there's a whole reasoning behind that. That's a philosophical diatribe I'll forgo torturing you with. But essentially, um, it created your greatest unconscious fear. And then your personality, your ego, is then designed to help protect you from that fear. And it does a really good job of it. Like it's a helpful defense coping mechanism. But then in adulthood, it tends to drive us into ditches and get us into all kinds of trouble, because we're trying to always outrun this fear, and it can really cause all kinds of significant problems for us. Um, and let me ask you this question, if you don't mind me poking at you just a little bit. Do you know your Enneagram type at all? Is it something you've worked with before?
I don't. It's actually something I haven't worked with. I'm a certified astrologer, no human design, but Enneagram is not something I've dealt with. But as you were speaking, it reminded me of as a child. So I was a Gen Xer raised by boomers and latchkey kid. Mom was working as hard as she could. Dad worked when he could keep his temper long enough to keep a job. But they made me scared of the woods, right?
Mhm.
Because I was alone a lot in the trailer, and they didn't want me to get eaten by gator. There was
Mhm.
ponds everywhere, and but they instilled so much fear in me, Doug, that as an adult, when I married my current husband, who was born and raised in the woods and loves the woods and tours the woods, and we started going hiking, and it was a strange experience. And it made me realize how much I missed out on as a child, because I would walk to the edge of those woods and just stand there and stare and
Oh,
wonder what
wow.
was out there,
Oh,
you know?
wow.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
that translate into
So
your adult life? Do you feel that when you go to a negative emotional space as an adult, do you go to fear more often than other emotions?
I used to go to anger,
Mhm.
and now it's more grieving. I'm
Mm,
grieving a lot in my current personal practice.
mm.
And I'm going through surgical menopause too, which doesn't help.
No, sure doesn't. Sure
I've
does.
experienced a depression I didn't know existed, quite honestly. Everybody's
Oh,
like hot flashes and mood swings. I'm like, there's 100 symptoms related to this. So, but yeah, no, anger, but I was also in active addiction. I was an alcoholic, so that didn't help with anger,
yeah.
and I was raised by angry parents.
Ah,
And but now there is a lot of grieving in my process, and it's good. It's a good grieving. It's a necessary grieving. And it's so strange. We run, some of us run in flight from these emotions our whole lives, but man, when we turn and face them, it's not that bad. It's not that
how did
bad.
that can I ask, I'm just curious, how did that anger express itself for you?
Fighting people.
Yeah.
So I eventually started training in martial arts. I trained for 11 years. I ran a Gracie Jiu Jitsu martial arts training center, one of only a few women at the time around the globe that was doing it. But I was raised in the swamps of Louisiana. My mom, when she found out I had a 10th grade bully in fourth grade, put penny rolls, speaking of penny rolls, in my hands. And we went to fight out in the middle of the road off everybody's land. So
Oof,
that's how they handled conflict. I know, when I was the
wow.
skinny kid, and this was the biggest girl in school. I
Yeah.
was terrified. But so they hit conflict head on, literally in the face. So then when I started training martial arts, I thought, I want to be a badass. I want to learn how to fight for real. And what happened in my martial arts journey is now I do not want to fight at all. I know how to dissipate aggressive energy. It's just so interesting how much we grow, and we get into one thing thinking it's going to be for something, and we learn something completely different.
Wow. So let me ask you, I'm trying to maybe do a
You're trying to
difficult
figure me out.
I am, and this is fraught with difficulty. It's really something that probably should best avoided, but I can't help myself. So that anger, do you, um, does it come out, like when you're in a team or a group, do you often feel this kind of urge to be in charge and kind of take control of situations that you find yourself in?
I feel like I'm responsible too, because nobody else is gonna.
Yeah. And do you have a really hard time with injustice and like if something
Yes. Oh, fairness and
fairness?
injustice. Oh, it makes no sense to me because I'm like, I would never do it. I
Yeah.
would never do it. So yeah,
And
I
if
always thought
some
it was my Libra ascendant in my astrology chart that was like had a problem with injustice.
Yeah, well, and then once if someone betrays you, like, does that like one of your biggest triggers or somebody
That's a cutoff.
yeah.
That's a boundary. That's an immediate. Actually, it's just so fascinating. My daughter and I were having that conversation because I just reconnected with a friend that had done something, and I ghosted him for about 2 years, and we just recently reconnected. But yeah, betrayal, lying, actions. I mean, you can tell me the truth. You can tell me anything, and I'm cool with it. But lying and betrayal, I can't deal with it. And in my second marriage, there was a lot of chronic betrayal with other humans. So it didn't help any at all. There was a lot of trauma to recover from that. So yeah, but no, injustice gets me. I collect crystals, and I have a set of balanced crystals right over here.
Mhm.
They're balanced. One's black, one's white, but they're even. They're scales.
Wow. And
Yeah.
and would if you were to say like if you had a superpower as a human being, would you say that maybe one of your great gifts is having like a super amount of energy? Are you a really high intense energy person?
Oh, my husband and I have a running joke because it's called "Keep Up with Me."
Okay.
Because he's like a turtle,
Mhm.
drives me nuts. He's like at 35 miles an hour, and I'm like at 95, and so we're constantly trying to be at 55 together.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, I think I know your type, if
What's
you're
my
willing.
type? Tell
I think
me.
you're what we call it's type 8, and the
Okay.
numbers don't matter. They're just placeholders, so there's no good or bad types. All types are good when they're healthy, and all types are bad when they're not, and all types have a spiritual journey that they're on, and so your Enneagram really does what it does. One of its many utility tools is it kind of maps what your spiritual journey might look like to move from your shadow, your darkest side, to your more healthier side, which it sounds like you've made a lot of progress on. So your type change, the way you express your type changes dramatically over the course of your life if you're taking the spiritual and the psychological journey seriously. But type 8, we call them the challenger, and I give them car names because I think it's kind of fun and playful. And I call type 8 the Humvee of egos. They can kind of run over kind of anything gets in their way. And
I do have a saying, just get out of my way.
Yep. And so they like to be in charge and stay in charge for the reasons, for a host of reasons. But maybe the salient point is that each type has a deep unconscious fear. And for type 8, their deepest fear is being harmed or controlled by others.
Mm-hmm.
So they really want to be in control, not so much they want the powers, it's they don't want anybody above them who's going to be able
Take
to
their choice away.
take their
That's
choice
my
away.
thing. Take my choice away.
Right.
As a trauma survivor of much, my choices were taken away.
Right.
And I think too, because there was so much chaos in childhood, there's a part of me that's like, God, if I can control everything, right, then everything will stay okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. That's an 8. That's a classic 8. And then the sense of betrayal and injustice. And and this gets a little more, we could go into this all day, but maybe bringing it back to the money piece a little bit, which is, well, how much more should I say about the 8 before I pivot? Well, again, the superpower of 8s is having a super amounts of energy, and not to get too so. I always struggle how to frame this for people because the words can be a little triggering. But if you remember, in the Christian tradition, we talk about the 7 deadly sins, and it was originally developed by a guy named Evagrius of Ponticus. He had 8, and then this guy Pope Gregory came in and said, no, actually there's 7, and actually we got stuck with 7, but that actually wasn't creative enough. Turns out there's 9. And so when we talk, they forgot about cowardice, being a sin or a vice, and they forgot about deceit or lying or just deception. And now I want to pull back a little bit so nobody's getting triggered by the word sin. The word sin in the original Greek is an archery term. It means to miss the mark. It's like, how do you tend to miss the mark when you're aiming at a target? Or like if you're got a golf swing, like how does your golf swing tend to go sideways? Right?
Well, I love miss the mark because there's opportunity for improvement in that. There's no shame in that. There's no guilt in that. It's just like whoops, I missed. Let me try again.
Right. And the worst thing you want to do when you miss the mark is be beating yourself up over the last shot. You want to learn from it, but it's not like, oh my God, fire and damnation. It's like, no, this is how you tend to, when you're aiming at things in life, when you're reaching your goals, where do you tend to fall a little bit? Or, like we don't all have the same flaw, sort of fatal flaw or thing that we get tripped up on. So for 8s, they're sort of deadly sin. We call them their passion is sometimes the word used. It's an archaic usage of that word, is what we call lust. It's this lust for intensity. Like you have this passionate approach to life, and it's just going after it, like just all in. And
I've been called intense a few times.
Yeah, so it's not just about sex. They can be sexually very passionate, and it's just this like if
lust for life, like going and getting it, grabbing it by the balls. Yes.
Right. Yes. And if someone pushes you, you're going to push back harder. Like if something comes at you, you're going to for 8s, it's the idea that the best defense is a good offense. Like
you got it.
Yeah. So
before it happens to me. Yeah.
that gives you a little sense of the 8. And so I don't know, it helps explain things a little bit. And I can go deeper into that, or we can pivot to the money part, if whatever you want.
Okay. So you've identified me as an 8. All right. And then how would you take your client further? So now we know where some wounds are. We know where some control issues are. We know some re-wounds. I don't like the word triggers. It's so overused. Yeah. Re-wounds are injustice and unfairness. So how does that relate to money? You're welcome to use me as an example.
Sure. So for the 8, And there's one other sidebar here I would be remiss not to mention. If your natural defense, if your natural coping strategy is this, what we call this intense pushing out, you have a secondary, if your ego addiction is that intense lust of pushing out. Sometimes when eights overdo it, they often uh, th- there's a secondary trait, which is this sort of rigid withdrawal. So sometimes if
Mhm.
you get too much in trouble or too like comes where the offense isn't working or it's creating problems for you, or it's a situation you just can't control, then what eights will do is pull back really this rigidly defensive
Or just
posture
shut
or
down.
shut
We
down.
can
So
shut down. Yep.
right, right.
Yeah.
So that's another
Yeah.
thing to just be aware of within your type. Like there's those two opposite responses that you have. So you have two ways of dealing with reality, not just one, but two coping mechanisms there that both show up at different times. So we call it your stress response. Like when you're under stress, you tend to just shut down and pull back into yourself. That if that tracks for you.
It tracks. It
Okay.
tracks.
Now back to the money piece. So what I've done with the Enneagram is I've layered on top of it what I call the attachment theory of money, which is identical to the attachment theory of relationships, which I'm sure you're familiar with. But
Yes.
if your listeners aren't, it basically says in relationships, like when we have an unhealthy relationship to our romantic partner or to our loved ones, we can either be anxiously attached, maybe too clingy and too codependent and too needy, we're grasping too hard, or we can be avoidant and we pull back and we pull away and retreat into ourselves and try to avoid the situation, right? And the same thing I think I found to be true for money. But when we're in a stress response to money, we can either be anxiously attached, right, where we're going at it too hard, kind of like you were describing earlier in your career, like my father was in his corporate climb up he climbed the corporate ladder like there was a bonfire at his looking at his heels, like it was just he couldn't get far enough fast enough. And
Yeah.
then there's the opposite, which was what I did in the monastery, is that avoidance is to run away. Or like Brother Pius we talked about earlier. It's that um, and then we can come up with all kinds of justifications for either our avoidance or our anxious attachment to money. And for a type 8, there's and we can have both, just like in relationships, you can kind of flip back
Mhm.
and forth between both, or depending on the context or the situation. And you might be anxious in one area of your financial life, you might be avoidant in another. And so the key areas of your financial life that I break it down to four. So there's what I call the four pillars of finance, and that's going to be earning, then saving, investing, and giving. So earning, saving, investing, and giving are the kind of the four pillars,
Love them. Love
right?
giving. Love that you
So
put giving in there. Yeah.
right, right. So some people they're anxious earners, but they're avoidant savers. They make a lot, but they don't keep a lot, right? It comes in, it goes out, right? Some people are good at the saving part, but they never invest. They're terrified, like they just hoard it and they never put it to work in the markets for whatever reasons. And some people do great at the investing part, but they never get to the giving part. They never use their wealth as a tool for love and service in the world, which is its main purpose for being there, right? That's really the whole
Yeah.
point of it is you want this wealth so you can go out there and do something good in the world with it. It empowers you,
And
empowers your
have some
talent,
freedom
have some
to do that.
freedom.
Freedom and time. Yes. Yes.
Okay, so if that framework makes sense, now let's talk about the money, what I call the money monsters for the eight. And the avoid money monster is what I call the detonator. And what I mean by that is they tend to blow up their budget. Like they don't want to be controlled by their money, so they just sort of blow through prudent financial limitations. They just if they're in a
Been
restaurant.
there, done that. Back and forth, back and forth. It's like I have it, I don't. I have it, I don't. I have it, I don't. I have it, I
Right,
don't. Now we volunteer. We volunteer music in nursing homes. I teach trauma informed self defense in domestic violence shelters. So we give. But yeah, much of my life has been having it and not having it, having it, not having it. It's kind of what it has looked like. Yeah,
yep. So that's
making a
one.
ton of it. Yeah,
Yeah,
but not holding on to it.
yeah, because you just don't want to be. It's like
I
you want to do
don't
what
want
you
to
want
be
to do.
controlled.
You want to be controlled, and you don't want to be controlled by the budget. You don't want to be controlled by the limitation. It's just I want to do
Don't
it.
make
I'm going to
me
go.
do
Yep.
it.
So that's one money monster, and I'm using alliteration here. So each type has its own alliterated money monsters. So the anxious money monster call them the dominator, whereas they want all the money, like they want to be in top and they want to grab as much as they can, and often using it to control others. Like I've got the power, if I've got the money, I want the money, and now I've got the power, and now I'm going to dominate my environment and the people around me with this. Uh,
Well, it has been an interesting dynamic because I always have been the primary financial provider for my families that I've had, which is an interesting dynamic to find a balance in. And what I love about what you're talking about, what immediately came to me was couples working with you, because couples figuring out their types,
mhm.
right?
It's
And
huge.
understanding their types.
Hmm.
Because, I mean, let's be honest, finances are one of the biggest thing couples fight about, right?
100%.
Especially if it's stressful. If it ain't there, or you're not sure what to do with it, or you have different views of it. My hubby's very frugal. I'm not.
Right.
So, I mean, even just that, can create an argument over laundry detergent. I'm like,
Right.
get the laundry detergent. It's just we don't have time. And he's like, I'm
Yeah.
looking for the cheapest one. I'm like, just get the laundry detergent.
Yep. Is your husband really frugal, like super frugal?
Yes, it
Is he
drives me crazy.
is he more reserved and quiet generally in
Oh,
social?
he has his own mental health stuff. So around me, he is a different person, but around everybody else, he's calm, cool, chill dude.
Yeah.
Like when you meet him, you would think he's the calm, cool, chill one in the house, which actually he isn't, but
Right.
he's calm, cool, chill dude. Yeah.
Yeah.
And very frugal.
Does he have a s
Like,
have a small does he have a small gas tank for social interactions generally, or is he?
oh, yeah. Well, right now he's taking over the family business, the family
Yeah.
mechanic shop,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like a barber shop where people come and talk to him all day. And
Yeah.
so he'll be on like bolt 8 of an engine, and Joe Bob will come up and try to talk to him, and he told me, he said, "It's not the mechanicking that's exhausting me. I love that part.
Yeah.
It's the peopling."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
so speaking of couples, now without having a deeper conversation with your husband like I'm having with you, but just from what little you've shared with me, he might be a type 5, because they're just like lust is the kind of thing that 8s struggle with. Stinginess is the thing that 5s struggle with.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just stinginess of money; it's stinginess with their emotions and their feelings, and they have a hard time letting things out. I don't know if that.
And figuring out what to say. Like, he takes a long time to formulate his thoughts.
Yeah, they
And
get trapped in their head.
yes,
They're trying to figure everything out in their head, and then they're
before
gonna
he's
act, and then they're gonna speak, and then
yes.
they might be thinking about something, and then, like, 2 days later, like, "Oh, I now here's the thing I was thinking." I can't get it out, and it finally comes out, like, way after the fact.
Well, and ironically, we met our love story is fantastical. We met with only 30 days clean. We have 8 years sober together now, but so we 13 stepped our way into a healthy marriage, and there's a 16-year age gap with me being the senior, so that creates some interesting dynamics too. But I mean, we make it work, and we only make it work because he does his work and I do my work, and we
Yep,
meet in the middle.
yep,
If you're not both on the growth path, it
yep,
it's destined to not be as healthy as it could be. Let's just say that. Not
yeah,
destined for failure, but destined to not be as healthy. But yeah, we try to meet in the middle. Like my work is kind of my passion. His music is his passion.
yeah,
He has his music room. I have my office. So we do meet in the middle. But we won't call him stingy, but we'll call him frugal. He will stand in front of that damn laundry aisle. And
mhm,
toilet paper is the worst. I'm like, just get the toilet paper. Just get it's $1 and it's softer. It
yep,
matters.
yep,
Okay. Do not get the cheapest toilet paper.
yep. Well, if you ever wanna do some couples work, I got some tools for
Look, I'm
you.
on board. All my guests, I'm like, I'm gonna be working with you. I'm
Yeah,
gonna have like a coaching fee of like $25,000 a month because every guest I have on, I want to work with. But I thought about that, how brilliant it is that you are available for couples,
mhm,
right? Rather than divorce guys.
right.
get some help around money, because money is one of the biggest emotional stressors in marriages. And if we don't have these conversations going into our
No,
relationships.
no, you're figuring it out on the fly. It's like trying to fix the car while it's moving, right? It's really tough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, Doug, this has been such a blast. I know I'm gonna be like looking this stuff up for days now. I
Uh,
so appreciate you using me as kind of your guinea pig to show people like what it is that you do. I love the brilliance of identifying those childhood wounds so they can be looked at, so they can be yeah, healed is not a word I use a lot, but
right.
managed more
Manage.
effectively,
Yeah.
managed more effectively, and work with money in a way where it's not evil and there's healthy ways to do it. And I love your 4 areas. Let me ask you this: out of both of your books, which book would you tell people to go ahead and grab first if they
Okay.
wanted to grab one?
Well, this whole conversation has really been around my newest book called Taming Your Money Monster:
Okay.
9 Paths to Money Mastery with the Enneagram, which is what we've been doing today. So this conversation really sparked your interest. That would be the place to start. It's really around the psychology of money. My first book, From Monk to Money Manager, the subtitle is A Former Monk's Financial Guide to Becoming a Little Bit Wealthy and Why That's Okay. So, but that's really a nuts and bolts. If you struggle with financial literacy, if you want to understand the language of finance, everything you should have been taught in high school but weren't, that's kind of where I would start with that book.
Perfect. And where do people find you? We're going to
They
put
fi-
all your links on here, but where do they find you if they want to come work with you?
Yeah, I mean, on my website, it's my name, DougLynam.com, DOUGLYN as in Nicholas, AM as in Michael, DougLynam.com, and you can find my coaching. And I'm also a keynote speaker and do workshops and presentations for businesses and corporations as well. So if I can be a useful resource for your organization, I'd be happy to help out there as well.
Awesome, Doug. Well, this has been so much fun. Listen, friends, remember the greatest transformation rarely begins with changing your circumstances. It begins by changing the story you believe about yourself. And according to this conversation, the story you believe about money. And if you need some help with that, reach out to Doug. I'm Lisa Lacey, your host, writer, trauma educator, executive advisor. Welcome to the Edge. We will catch you guys next time. Doug, thank you so much for being our
Thank you.
guest
Appreciate it
today.
so much, Lisa. That was great.
That was a blast.